A cowboy finds three black women lying naked in the mud of a dried river, until one arm rises and the wandering preacher's horse rears back as if sensing ghosts clawing up from hell itself. The townsfolk whisper that the ghost preacher brings death wherever he rides, cursed since losing his calling to grief and shame. They cross themselves when he passes, certain he'll die forgotten and damned on some desolate trail. But when the determined leader among the three mud-caked women locks eyes with his, she sees past his hollow stare to the man who once moved heaven and earth for strangers. What she doesn't know is that helping them will awaken enemies who've been hunting not just her, but the secret network that could save hundreds of souls, or destroy them all. Will the broken preacher find his purpose again? Or will his return to righteousness become everyone's death sentence? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dust kicked up around Josiah Whitmore's boots as he dismounted outside the general store in Salvation Creek. The townspeople scattered like startled birds. A mother pulled her child closer. An old man spat in the dirt and turned away. "Ghost preacher's back," someone muttered. Josiah ignored the whispers. He'd heard worse in the last 2 years. The bell above the store door chimed as he entered. The shopkeeper's face went pale. "What do you need?" The man's voice shook slightly. "Supplies. Medical kit. Bandages. Your horse hurt again?" Josiah nodded. It was easier than explaining. He placed coins on the counter and gathered his purchases. Through the window, he spotted Sheriff Marcus watching him from across the street. Their eyes met briefly before the sheriff looked away. Outside, voices carried on the wind. "Heard tell there's fugitives in the area. Best keep the children close. Marcus will handle it proper." Josiah mounted his horse and rode east toward the dried riverbed. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cracked earth. Something pulled him forward. The same feeling he'd carried for months, like following breadcrumbs left by ghosts. The riverbed stretched before him, a scar in the landscape where water once flowed. His horse snorted and stepped sideways. Josiah dismounted, scanning the hardened mud. Then he saw it, a pattern in the earth that didn't belong to nature. 3 forms lay half buried in the dried clay. Bodies. Women. Their skin caked with mud. Arms positioned deliberately across their faces. His heart hammered against his ribs. One arm rose slowly from the earth. Josiah dropped to his knees beside them. The woman's eyes opened, brown and fierce despite her weakness. "Please." The word came out as barely a whisper. He helped the first woman sit up. She was older, maybe 30, with intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything about him. The second woman appeared younger, with features that spoke of mixed heritage. The third was barely more than a girl. "Can you stand?" Josiah asked. The older woman nodded. "We need shelter. They'll come back." "Who?" "Men with badges. Said they had warrants." Josiah's blood chilled. He'd heard those words before. 2 years ago, when everything fell apart. He helped them to their feet. The women were weak but determined. They'd stripped their clothes to bury themselves completely, smart, desperate, familiar. "My homestead is close," he said. The older woman studied his face. "Why help us?" Josiah couldn't answer, didn't know himself. He gave them his coat and spare shirt from his saddlebags. The women dressed quickly, movements efficient despite their exhaustion. They walked in silence. His homestead appeared abandoned from the outside. Broken fence posts, weathered barn, windows dark as empty sockets. Inside, Josiah lit a lamp. The women looked around the main room. Simple furniture, a cold fireplace. Nothing special, nothing suspicious. The older woman stepped forward. "I'm Miriam. This is Ruth and Sarah." "Josiah. You're alone here?" He nodded. Had been for 2 years, since Mary and Grace died, since his world collapsed. Miriam walked to the kitchen area. Her hand traced along the wall until she found something. A loose board. She pressed it, and a section swung inward. Josiah's breath caught. He'd forgotten about the hidden compartments. "Underground Railroad Station," Miriam said. It wasn't a question. Ruth examined the concealed space. Medical supplies lined shelves, bandages, medicines, tools for treating wounded travelers. Sarah found another compartment near the fireplace. Maps, coded letters, records written in careful handwriting. Her eyes widened as she read. You helped people escape. Josiah's throat tightened. Used to. What happened? Miriam asked. They found out. Bounty hunters. Killed my family. The room fell silent. Ruth began cleaning their wounds with supplies from the hidden compartment. Her movements showed medical training, more than basic field care. Sarah continued reading the documents. These records show hundreds of people. 237, Josiah said quietly, before I stopped. Miriam sat across from him. We're conductors, too. We're moving a group of families north when they caught us. How many in your group? 15. Children and elders, mostly. Where are they now? Miriam's jaw tightened. Dead or captured. We were the only ones who got away. Ruth finished tending their injuries. The men chasing us aren't ordinary bounty hunters. They have federal papers, warrants that look legitimate. They're organized, Sarah added. Systematic. They knew exactly where to find us. Josiah stood and walked to the window. In the distance, dust clouds moved across the horizon. Riders. Still searching. How long were you buried? Since dawn, Miriam said. Heard them coming and hid. Old trick from slave days. They'll be back, Ruth said. Men like that don't give up. Sarah looked up from the documents. These letters mention other stations, other conductors. Josiah nodded. Network runs from Texas to Canada, hundreds of safe houses. If they're hunting conductors systematically, Miriam said, everyone's at risk. The weight of it settled over them. This wasn't just about 4 people hiding in an abandoned homestead. This was about a network that had saved thousands, about families still running north, about children who needed safe passage to freedom. Ruth checked the medical supplies again. We can't run forever. And we can't hide here indefinitely, Sarah added. Miriam stood and walked to Josiah. You saved us today, but this is bigger than just us now. Through the window, the riders had disappeared, but they'd be back. Men with badges and federal papers and the law on their side. Men who hunted people for profit. Josiah looked at the 3 women in his kitchen. Strangers 6 hours ago. Now partners in something that could save hundreds of lives or get them all killed. Sheriff Marcus stepped onto the porch of his office as 5 riders approached. The lead man wore a federal marshal's badge that caught the morning sunlight. His companions looked more like hired guns than lawmen. Sheriff Marcus? The man dismounted with practiced authority. Marshal Barnes, we're tracking dangerous fugitives in your territory. Marcus examined the federal papers Barnes handed him. The documents looked official. Seals and signatures in all the right places. But something felt wrong about these men. What kind of fugitives? Escaped slaves, armed and dangerous. They attacked a federal transport near Austin. Barnes spread wanted posters across Marcus's desk. 3 women's faces stared back. The drawings were crude but recognizable. Rewards $500 each, Barnes said, dead or alive. Marcus studied the posters again. The money was tempting, more than his annual salary, but federal jurisdiction meant questions, paperwork, attention from Austin. My territory's been quiet, Marcus said carefully. They're here. We tracked them to the riverbed east of town. One of Barnes's men leaned against the wall. Found signs, footprints leading north. North takes you to empty land. Few homesteads scattered around. Barnes smiled without warmth. Then we'll check everyone. The men mounted their horses and rode out. Marcus watched them disappear down the main street. Something about their story didn't add up. Escaped slaves didn't usually travel in small groups, and federal marshals didn't typically hunt them with such determination. He locked the wanted posters in his desk drawer and tried to forget the uneasy feeling in his gut. 5 miles north, Josiah worked in his barn while the women rested inside. The familiar rhythm of repairing tack helped calm his nerves. He'd spent 2 years avoiding this feeling, the weight of other people's lives in his hands. Through the barn door, he watched Miriam explore the homestead's exterior. She moved with purpose, examining everything. Her trained eye picked out details others would miss. Ruth had found his well and drawn fresh water. She worked methodically, cleaning and organizing medical supplies. Her movements suggested formal training beyond battlefield medicine. Sarah sat by the kitchen window, reading through his correspondence. The girl absorbed information like a sponge, every letter, every map, every coded message. Josiah returned to the house as afternoon shadows lengthened. The women had transformed the space. Medical station set up near the fireplace. Maps spread across the table. Supply inventory completed and organized. "You've been busy," he said. Miriam looked up from a letter she'd been studying. "These codes are sophisticated, military-grade encryption. Learned them during the war. Union intelligence officer taught me." Ruth examined a jar of medicine. "This morphine is recent. Where did you get it?" "Doctor in San Antonio. Sends supplies when he can." Sarah held up a map marked with symbols. "These routes are still active?" Josiah nodded. "Some of them. War scattered the network but didn't destroy it." Miriam spread 3 more maps across the table. "We need to talk about what we're really dealing with." The maps showed the entire Southwestern Underground Railroad network. Dozens of stations marked from Texas to Kansas, routes that had moved thousands of people to freedom. "Barnes isn't hunting just us," Miriam said. "He's targeting the whole system." Ruth pointed to marked locations. "These stations have gone dark in the past month. No communication, no travelers. That's not coincidence," Sarah added. "That's systematic destruction." Josiah studied the pattern. The missing stations formed a line moving north, like someone following the routes and eliminating them one by one. "He has inside information," Josiah said. Miriam nodded grimly. "Someone's talking, giving him names and locations. Or he's forcing people to talk." The room fell silent. They all knew what that meant: torture, death, families destroyed. Ruth opened her medical bag and pulled out a leather journal. "I've been keeping records. Every station we've visited, every conductor we've met." She spread the journal pages across the table. Names, dates, locations, a comprehensive record of Underground Railroad activities. "If Barnes gets this," she said quietly, "hundreds of people die." Sarah picked up one of the pages. "Some of these names I recognize from your letters, Josiah." He leaned over to look. Samuel Chen in California, Rebecca Martinez in New Mexico, Thomas Wright in Kansas. People he'd worked with for years, friends who'd risked everything to help strangers. "We have to warn them," Miriam said. "How?" "Barnes controls the territory between here and there." Ruth closed her journal. "We can't run north, can't go south. East takes us deeper into hostile territory. And west is desert," Sarah added. Josiah walked to the window. In the distance, dust clouds moved against the horizon. Riders, searching, getting closer. "They'll find us eventually," he said. Miriam joined him at the window. "Then we don't run." "What?" "We've been thinking like prey, hiding, reacting, running." Ruth packed her medical supplies. "What are you suggesting?" "We become hunters instead." Sarah looked up from the maps. "Hunt federal marshals?" "Hunt criminals pretending to be federal marshals." The distinction hit Josiah like a physical blow. He'd spent 2 years assuming Barnes and men like him were legitimate, that the law protected slave catchers and condemned conductors. "You think they're frauds?" Miriam pointed to the wanted posters Barnes had distributed. "Look at the paperwork. Really look." Sarah examined the documents with fresh eyes. Her literacy skills, rare among formerly enslaved people, allowed her to spot details others missed. "The seal is wrong," she said slowly. "And this signature doesn't match federal standards." "You can tell that?" Sarah nodded. "I've seen real federal documents, forged papers to help people travel north. These are good forgeries, but they're still fake. The implications settled over them like a heavy blanket. If Barnes wasn't legitimate federal authority, then everything changed. They weren't fugitives from justice. They were victims of criminals. Ruth stood and walked to Josiah's gun cabinet. If they're not real marshals, they have no legal authority. But they have guns and badges and official papers. Local sheriffs will support them. Miriam smiled for the first time since they'd met. Not if we can prove they're frauds. Through the window, the dust clouds had disappeared again. But the riders would return, tomorrow or the next day. And when they did, the 4 people in this abandoned homestead would be ready. Dawn brought silence to the homestead. No riders on the horizon. No dust clouds moving across the empty land. Josiah allowed himself a moment of hope as he watched the sunrise paint the sky orange and gold. Inside, the women had worked through the night. Maps covered every surface, documents sorted into careful piles, plans taking shape from desperation and determination. Miriam stood at the kitchen table studying a hand-drawn map of the region. Her finger traced routes between towns, marking distances and safe houses. The map showed intimate knowledge of the underground railroad network that extended far beyond Texas. "Tell me about Austin," she said to Josiah. "Central hub, 3 major routes converge there." "Why?" "Because that's where Barnes claims we attacked a federal transport, but we were in Louisiana that week." Ruth looked up from her medical journal. "I can prove it. Treated a family with cholera in Shreveport. Local doctor witnessed it." The pieces of their counter-strategy began forming. Alibis, witnesses, evidence that would expose Barnes's lies. Sarah approached with a stack of letters. "These correspondence records show something interesting." She spread the letters chronologically across the table. The handwriting revealed a pattern of communication that spanned years. Josiah's network reached into 12 states and territories. "You weren't just a conductor," Sarah said. "You were a coordinator." Josiah nodded slowly. Someone had to organize the larger movements, make sure routes stayed clear. "That's why they want you alive," Miriam realized. "You know the entire southwestern network." The truth settled over them like a cold wind. Barnes wasn't just hunting 3 escaped women. He was after the man who could give him every underground railroad station from Texas to Canada. Ruth closed her medical bag and walked to the window. "My turn to share something." She pulled a small leather pouch from inside her coat. Inside were medical instruments that spoke of advanced training, surgical tools, specialized medications, equipment that cost more than most people earned in a year. "Dr. Samuel Chen taught me in San Francisco, not just field medicine, surgery, anatomy, chemistry." Josiah examined the instruments. "These are hospital quality. I was his apprentice for 3 years, before the bounty hunters found us." The story emerged piece by piece. Ruth had worked in the first integrated hospital west of the Mississippi. Her mixed heritage allowed her to treat patients that other doctors wouldn't see. Chinese immigrants, Mexican families, African Americans. Chen was killed 6 months ago. Bounty hunters claimed he was harboring fugitives. Was he? Ruth smiled grimly. We all were. Sarah moved to the fireplace and pulled out another hidden compartment Josiah had forgotten existed. Inside were books, real books, not just maps and letters, literature, mathematics, science. "You had a school here," Sarah said. Josiah's throat tightened. "Mary taught the children. Travelers would stay for weeks sometimes. She made sure they could read before moving north." Sarah opened one of the books. The margins were filled with notes in different handwriting. Students practicing letters, working through problems, learning to write their own names. "I taught myself to read using books like these," Sarah said. "Stole them from the master's house, practiced writing with charcoal on barn walls." She demonstrated her skill by copying a passage in perfect script. Then she changed the words, maintaining the same handwriting style. Forgery so subtle it would fool most experts. "I made travel papers for dozens of families, bills of sale that turned slaves into freed servants, marriage certificates, birth records." The 3 women had revealed skills that transformed their situation completely. Miriam's strategic knowledge, Ruth's medical expertise, Sarah's forgery abilities. Combined with Josiah's network, they formed something Barnes hadn't anticipated, a threat. Miriam gathered the maps and began sketching a new plan. Barnes thinks he's hunting fugitives, but we're going to hunt him. How do we find him? We don't. We make him come to us. Ruth prepared a medical kit with specific supplies, not for treating wounds, but for creating them. Theater makeup from her San Francisco days, compounds that simulated fever and illness. Sarah selected paper and ink from Josiah's supplies. Her forgery work began with federal letterhead, official seals, signatures that matched Barnes's documents but contained subtle differences. "What are you making?" Josiah asked. "Contradictory orders, messages that will confuse his chain of command." The plan took shape throughout the morning. They would use Barnes's own methods against him: false documentation, misdirection, the appearance of federal authority. But first, they needed to understand their enemy completely. Miriam spread the wanted posters across the table again. "These aren't random drawings. Someone who knew us made these sketches." Ruth examined her own likeness. The artist got details right: scars, facial structure. This isn't guesswork. "Someone from the network betrayed us," Sarah said quietly. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Somewhere in their trusted circle of conductors and safe house operators, someone had sold information to Barnes. Josiah walked to his gun cabinet and removed a Winchester rifle. "Then we can't trust anyone in the network." "We can't trust anyone we haven't met face to face," Miriam corrected. "But some people are worth the risk." She pointed to names on their contact list, people Josiah had worked with for years, men and women who'd proven their commitment through actions, not just words. Dr. Martinez in El Paso, Thomas Wright in Kansas, Rebecca Santos in New Mexico. Too far away to help us now, but close enough to verify our story when this is over. Ruth finished her medical preparations. "How do we know Barnes won't just shoot us on sight?" "Because he needs us alive," Sarah said. "Dead conductors can't give him information about the network." The afternoon passed in careful preparation, each person rehearsing their role, memorizing details, preparing for a confrontation that would either expose Barnes as a fraud or get them all killed. As evening approached, Josiah stood on his porch and looked across the empty landscape. Somewhere out there, Barnes and his men were planning their next move, probably assuming their quarry was still hiding and running. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The wounded man appeared at dawn, slumped over his horse's neck. Blood soaked through his shirt, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. Josiah helped him down while Ruth rushed forward with her medical bag. "Name's Daniel Porter," the man whispered. "Underground Railroad conductor from Austin." Ruth examined his wounds. Bullet graze across the ribs. Nothing fatal, but he'd lost significant blood. She began cleaning the injury while the man spoke in broken sentences. "Barnes hit our station 3 days ago. Took everyone. Had a ledger with names and locations." Josiah's blood ran cold. "What kind of ledger?" "Complete records. Every safe house from here to Kansas. Every conductor. Every route." Miriam knelt beside Porter. "How did he get it?" "Marcus Whitfield, station master in Austin. They tortured him until he talked." The name hit Josiah like a physical blow. He'd known Marcus for 5 years, trusted him with dozens of operations. The man had personally guided over 100 people to freedom. Sarah looked up from the documents she'd been studying. "If Barnes has those records, everyone in the network is compromised." Ruth finished bandaging Porter's wound. "How many people know about this?" "Barnes is moving fast, hitting stations before word can spread. We're the first ones to get away." Porter reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a blood-stained notebook. "Grabbed this before we ran. It's Marcus's backup records. Shows which stations Barnes already hit." Miriam opened the notebook. Page after page of names crossed out in red ink. Safe houses marked as destroyed. Conductors listed as captured or dead. The systematic destruction of their entire network. 37 stations eliminated in 2 weeks, she said quietly. Josiah studied the pattern. Barnes was working his way north methodically, eliminating resistance, building a complete picture of underground railroad operations. There's more, Porter continued. Barnes isn't working alone. He's got backing, money, resources. This isn't some rogue bounty hunter operation. Ruth prepared a sedative for Porter. What kind of backing? Political. Maybe federal. Someone wants the Underground Railroad destroyed permanently. Sarah examined the notebook more carefully. Her literacy skills revealed details others missed. Dates, patterns, evidence of coordination between multiple groups. These attacks are too well timed, she said. Someone's providing intelligence about conductor movements. Inside information, Miriam agreed. But from where? Porter's eyes fluttered as Ruth's sedative took effect. Check the Austin records. Marcus kept duplicates of everything, if they still exist. Josiah helped carry Porter to the back room where he could rest safely. The man would live, but his information changed everything. They weren't just dealing with Barnes anymore. They were fighting a coordinated effort to destroy the Underground Railroad completely. In the kitchen, Sarah spread Porter's notebook across the table alongside their existing documents. The combined information painted a terrifying picture. Barnes has hit stations in a specific order, she said. Always the largest ones first, the hubs that coordinate multiple routes. He's not just capturing people, Miriam realized. He's dismantling the entire network structure. Ruth cleaned her medical instruments while thinking through the implications. If he has Marcus's records, he knows about this station. Then why hasn't he come here yet? Josiah walked to the window and scanned the horizon. Because he's saving us for last. We're the prize he really wants. The truth settled over them. Josiah's station wasn't just another safe house. It was a coordination center, a place where routes from 3 states converged. Taking it would eliminate the Underground Railroad's ability to move people through the entire southwestern region. Miriam began packing essential documents. We can't stay here. Where do we go? Barnes controls everything between here and safety. Sarah held up one of the documents from Porter's notebook. Not everything. Look at this. She pointed to a list of stations that remained active. Small operations, family farms and rural churches that Barnes hadn't targeted yet. He's focused on the big stations, ignoring the little ones, because they don't move enough people to matter, unless they work together. The plan began forming. Instead of running north to established routes, they would move laterally, station to station, building a new network from the small operations Barnes had overlooked. Ruth finished her medical preparations. Porter needs at least 2 days to travel safely. We don't have 2 days, Josiah said. If Barnes has Marcus's records, he knows exactly where we are. Through the window, dust appeared on the southern horizon. Riders, moving fast, still miles away, but getting closer. Miriam grabbed the most critical documents. Decision time. Fight or run. If we run, they'll track us down eventually, and Porter dies. Ruth looked toward the back room where their wounded guest rested. I won't abandon a patient. Sarah gathered her forgery supplies. Then we make our stand here. Josiah opened his gun cabinet. 4 rifles. Ammunition. Enough for a brief fight, but not a sustained battle. Barnes has at least 5 men. Maybe more. Then we don't fight them directly. Miriam walked to the hidden compartments and began removing supplies. Oil lamps, rope, materials that could serve multiple purposes. We use what we know about this place, the hidden passages, secret compartments, turn the homestead into a maze. Ruth prepared her medical station in the most defensible room. I'll stay with Porter. Keep him stable. Sarah positioned herself near the kitchen with her documents and forgery supplies. If this goes wrong, I can create new identities for whoever survives. Josiah took position at the front window with his rifle. The dust cloud was closer now, individual riders becoming visible. Barnes in the lead, federal badge glinting in the afternoon sun. Remember, Miriam said quietly, we're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for everyone Marcus's ledger will condemn. The riders approached the homestead at a steady pace. confident, expecting to find frightened fugitives hiding in an abandoned house. They were about to discover their mistake. Barnes dismounted 50 yards from the homestead, his 4 men spread out in a semicircle, rifles ready. The federal badge on his chest caught the afternoon light as he approached the front door. "Josiah Whitmore," he called out. "Federal Marshal Barnes, open up." Silence from inside the house. Barnes nodded to his men. 2 moved toward the back. 2 remained with him at the front. "We know you're harboring fugitives. Come out peaceful and nobody gets hurt." Still no response. Barnes tried the door handle. Unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The main room appeared empty. Furniture covered in dust sheets. No signs of recent occupation. Barnes stepped inside, gun drawn. Behind him, one of his men whispered, "Looks abandoned." "It's not." Barnes examined the floor. Boot prints in the dust. Recent ones. "Search every room." They moved through the house methodically. Kitchen empty, bedrooms vacant. No trace of the 3 women or their protector. In the back room, Barnes found Daniel Porter unconscious on a makeshift bed. Bandages covered his torso. Medical supplies scattered on a nearby table. "Got a wounded man here," Barnes called out. His lieutenant examined Porter. "Underground Railroad conductor from Austin. Recognize him from our raids." Barnes smiled coldly. "Wake him up. He's been drugged, sedated heavy." Then we wait. But waiting wasn't Barnes's strength. He began searching the house more thoroughly, looking for hidden compartments, secret passages, evidence of Underground Railroad activity. In the kitchen, loose boards near the fireplace caught his attention. He pried them open and found maps, documents, records of conductor activities spanning years. "Jackpot," he muttered. The papers revealed the scope of Josiah's operation. Hundreds of escaped slaves guided north, dozens of safe houses coordinated, a network that had cost Southern plantation owners millions in lost property. One of his men returned from searching the barn. Found fresh horse tracks leading east, multiple riders. How fresh? Hour, maybe 2. Barnes studied the tracks through the barn door. 4 horses, heading toward the Badlands where tracking became difficult. His quarry was running again. "Mount up, we're moving." But as Barnes gathered the discovered documents, something felt wrong. The papers were too easy to find. Too obvious. Like someone wanted them discovered. He examined the maps more carefully. Routes marked in fresh ink. Notations that looked recent. This wasn't old intelligence. These were active operational plans. "Sir," his lieutenant called from outside, "you need to see this." Barnes stepped onto the porch. In the distance, smoke rose from 3 different locations, signal fires, spaced exactly as Underground Railroad emergency protocols dictated. "They're warning the network," Barnes realized. His men were already mounting their horses. The chase would resume. But Barnes felt the initiative slipping away. His quarry wasn't just running. They were fighting back. 5 miles east, hidden in a canyon outcropping, Josiah lowered his spyglass. Barnes had taken the bait. The forged documents Sarah had prepared would send him chasing phantom routes for days. "Signal fires are lit," Miriam reported. "Every conductor within 50 miles will know Barnes is here." Ruth finished checking Porter's bandages. The man was conscious, but weak. "He can travel if we move slowly." "We're not traveling," Sarah said. She held up a document she'd been crafting. "We're hunting." The paper looked like official federal correspondence. Orders reassigning Marshal Barnes to a different territory. Signed by a fictional superior officer using bureaucratic language that sounded authentic. "This won't fool Barnes himself," Sarah said, "but it might fool local sheriffs." Josiah studied the forgery. Sheriff Marcus in Salvation Creek doesn't know Barnes personally. Just saw his credentials once. Exactly. We create confusion in his support network. Miriam spread a map across the rocky ground. Barnes needs local cooperation to operate effectively. Without it, he's just another outlaw gang. The plan crystallized. Instead of running from Barnes, they would undermine his authority. Turn his allies against him, expose him as a fraud using the very system he'd been exploiting. Ruth prepared travel supplies while the others planned. This is dangerous if we're caught impersonating federal officials. We're already fugitives, Josiah said. Can't get much worse. Sarah finished her forgery work. 3 sets of documents, federal credentials for Josiah, reassignment orders for Barnes, arrest warrants for his associates. These will hold up to casual inspection, she said, but not detailed scrutiny. Then we don't give anyone time for detailed scrutiny. They mounted their horses and rode toward Salvation Creek. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape. In the distance, dust clouds showed Barnes still chasing false leads toward the Badlands. The timing had to be perfect. They needed to reach Sheriff Marcus before Barnes returned, plant doubt about Barnes's legitimacy, create enough confusion to break his local support network. As they rode, Porter gradually regained strength. Ruth's medical treatment had stabilized him, but he remained weak from blood loss. "Tell me about Sheriff Marcus," Miriam said to Josiah. "Honest man, follows the law as he understands it, but he's not sophisticated about federal jurisdiction." "Perfect. He'll believe whoever presents the most convincing paperwork." Sarah patted her saddlebag containing the forged documents. "Then it's good these are very convincing." They reached the outskirts of Salvation Creek as evening approached. The town looked peaceful, normal. Unaware that federal marshals and Underground Railroad conductors were playing a deadly game in the surrounding countryside. Josiah dismounted behind the sheriff's office. "Remember, we're federal investigators sent to audit Barnes's operation. Questions have been raised about his methods." Miriam nodded. "And we need local cooperation to determine if he's exceeded his authority." Ruth helped Porter down from his horse. "What's my role?" "Witness to Barnes's illegal activities. Evidence that he's been operating outside federal guidelines." Sarah checked her forged credentials one final time. "Everyone ready?" They approached the sheriff's office as a group, Josiah in the lead, presenting the appearance of federal authority, the others following as his investigative team. Through the window, Sheriff Marcus sat at his desk reviewing paperwork. Alone. Perfect. Josiah knocked on the door. Sheriff Marcus looked up as Josiah entered his office. Behind him came 3 companions and a wounded man who needed support to walk. "Federal Inspector Whitmore," Josiah said, presenting Sarah's forged credentials. "We're investigating irregularities in Marshal Barnes's operation." Marcus examined the papers carefully. The seals looked authentic. The signatures matched federal standards he'd seen before. "What kind of irregularities?" "Unauthorized raids, excessive force, questions about his federal authority." Ruth helped Porter into a chair. "This man was wounded during one of Barnes's operations. We need his testimony." Marcus studied Porter's bandages. "He needs a doctor." "I am a doctor," Ruth said. "Federal medical examiner. I've been documenting Barnes's activities." The sheriff's confusion was visible. Barnes had presented legitimate federal papers just days ago. Now these investigators claimed he was operating illegally. Miriam stepped forward with another document. "These are reassignment orders for Barnes. He's been recalled pending investigation." Marcus read the orders twice. "He didn't mention being reassigned when I saw him yesterday." "Because he doesn't know yet," Josiah said. "We need your help to serve these papers safely." Outside, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Barnes returning from his fruitless chase. His timing couldn't have been worse. "That's him now," Marcus said, looking through the window. "Perfect," Josiah replied. "You can serve the papers with federal witnesses present." Barnes dismounted outside the sheriff's office. His men looked tired and frustrated. The chase through the Badlands had yielded nothing but false trails and wasted time. He pushed through the office door and stopped short. 4 strangers stood with Sheriff Marcus, official-looking people with federal bearing. "Marshal Barnes," Marcus said formally. "These investigators need to speak with you." Barnes examined the group suspiciously. Something felt wrong. The older man looked familiar, but he couldn't place the face. "Inspector Whitmore, Federal Bureau," Josiah said, showing his credentials. "We're conducting an audit of your recent activities." Barnes checked the papers. They looked legitimate, but federal audits didn't usually happen in remote sheriff's offices. "I wasn't notified of any investigation." "Because the investigation concerns your notification procedures," Ruth interjected, "among other irregularities." Sarah pulled out a thick folder of documents. "We have reports of unauthorized raids, excessive force, operations outside your designated jurisdiction." The papers looked official. Complaint forms, witness statements, federal letterhead throughout. Barnes couldn't identify specific forgeries, but the whole situation felt orchestrated. "Who filed these complaints?" Porter struggled to his feet. "I did, after you destroyed our station in Austin without proper warrants." Barnes recognized him immediately, the wounded conductor from their raid 3 days ago. But how had he reached federal investigators so quickly? "That man is a wanted fugitive," Barnes said. "That man is a federal witness under protective custody," Miriam replied. "Any attempt to arrest him would be obstruction of justice." Marcus looked between Barnes and the investigators. "Marshal, these orders say you're being reassigned pending review." Barnes read the reassignment papers. They looked authentic down to the smallest details, but he knew no such orders had been issued. "These documents are forgeries." "That's a serious accusation," Josiah said calmly. "Are you claiming federal investigators are using fraudulent papers?" The trap was perfect. If Barnes insisted the papers were fake, he was accusing federal officials of fraud. If he accepted them as real, he had to follow the reassignment orders. "I want to verify these through official channels," Barnes said. "Of course." "Sheriff Marcus can witness your compliance while we arrange verification." Sarah opened her folder again. "Meanwhile, we need to examine your operational records, warrants, arrest reports, evidence of federal authorization." Barnes hesitated. His forged federal papers would never survive detailed federal scrutiny, but refusing to cooperate would also raise suspicions. Outside, his men waited by their horses. They could fight their way out, but not without exposing their true nature, not with Sheriff Marcus watching. "My records are in order," Barnes said finally. "Excellent. Then you won't mind surrendering them for review." Ruth stepped forward with her medical bag. "I also need to examine your prisoners for evidence of mistreatment." "What prisoners?" "The conductors you captured in your recent raids." "Federal law requires humane treatment of all detainees." Barnes realized he was trapped. He'd been killing or selling the people he captured. No official records existed because his operation was entirely illegal. "The prisoners were transferred to federal custody in Austin." Sarah made a note. "We'll need the transfer documents, names of receiving officers, chain of custody records." Each question revealed another gap in Barnes's fabricated authority. Marcus watched the exchange with growing suspicion. "Marshal," the sheriff said slowly, "maybe you should cooperate with these investigators." Barnes's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. Too many witnesses. Too many questions that would follow gunfire. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," he said. "Of course," Josiah replied. "Sheriff Marcus can hold your weapons and badge pending verification of your federal status." "That's not necessary. It's standard procedure for reassigned marshals under investigation." Marcus extended his hand. "Badge and gun, Marshal. Just temporary." Barnes looked around the room. 5 people watching him. All armed, all ready for trouble. Fighting would confirm their accusations and destroy any remaining credibility. He handed over his badge and weapon. "Thank you for your cooperation," Miriam said. "We'll have this resolved quickly." Barnes walked outside where his men waited. They read his expression and reached for their guns. "Stand down," he ordered quietly. "We're leaving." "What about the fugitives?" "They're not fugitives anymore. They're federal witnesses." The men mounted their horses and rode out of town. Barnes knew he was finished in this territory. His federal masquerade had been exposed by people who understood the system better than he did. Inside the sheriff's office, the 4 conspirators watched through the window until Barnes disappeared. "That was brilliant," Marcus said. "How long have you been tracking him?" "Long enough," Josiah replied. "Thank you for your cooperation, Sheriff." 6 months later, the homestead bustled with activity. Former slaves arrived weekly seeking passage north. Children attended classes in the converted barn. Ruth's medical practice served travelers and local families alike. Josiah stood on his porch, watching Sarah teach a group of young students to write their names. Miriam coordinated with conductors across 3 states from the kitchen table that had become Underground Railroad headquarters. Daniel Porter had recovered completely and now helped coordinate the expanded network. Barnes and his men had disappeared, their criminal operation exposed and scattered. The Underground Railroad was stronger than ever, built on trust, intelligence, and the unbreakable bonds between people who chose to fight injustice together.